Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Welcome to an episode, our newest episode of Talking the Terror 2. We've got Terror Infamy on deck this season. I'm here. My name is Jen, and I am joined by Kinte, as always, my steadfast partner in pretty much everything podcasting. So, Kinte, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm wonderful. And I'm happy to be here.
I've been waiting for this season to come around for a long time. I know it's only been, I guess it's been a little bit more than a year. It doesn't feel like too much more than a year, but I feel like I've been waiting for this for a really long time. And I think it's because, and I just want to touch on it real quick, the last season of The Terror was so well done that I was really excited to see what they would do with this with an anthology like idea. And I'm wrong, actually. It's been more than a year. It's been quite a bit more than a year. But it's been, I feel like they've given us quite a bit of advanced information and all kinds of little snips of, hey, it might be like this, it might be like that. And now that we finally get to see it, I wasn't disappointed. I was really pretty happy with it, but there's a lot to sort of dissect and get into. So the first thing I want to ask you, just right off the top, before we even go any further, is what were your first impressions of the show, just based on what you sort of initially saw? And did you feel like it was a good introduction to the story that we're about to have unfold?
It went very much like I kind of thought it would be, and not taking anything away from it or anything like that. Uh, I felt like it was going to have this kind of pacing to it, as well as that it was going to have basically the pacing. I wasn't surprised about. Um, I, I thought it was interesting. You know, um, I'm not going to say that I'm already hooked into the storyline just of yet, because we have so much more to get to for me to get to that point. But it was enough to get my attention and to get me to want to see more. So with that said, yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
I'm actually very much like you. I did expect, just knowing what we saw last season, that it starts slow, and I believe that the Terror last time started slow. We didn't see anything really supernatural for quite some time, so that was quite a bit of a difference. But the tension and the mood, they really sort of set things up to be a bit of a slow stretch to start, and then things started to ramp up. I will say right off the bat that I think, and this is just, we're going to talk about this, I think, as the series goes on, but there is definitely a cultural connection that needs to be made here, which is a little bit of a jump. And whereas the Terror began with a kind of history that felt maybe a little bit more familiar, this history doesn't feel quite as familiar. And it's interesting because, it's actually further ahead in history. But even living in Hawaii, I don't have a lot of uh, cultural references for Japanese American pretty much anything. And so there's a lot to sort of learn as we go. And I think that that might have been a little bit of that connection, is that the story itself may not make a whole lot of sense until we start seeing a little bit more, because there is so heavy a cultural piece in here. Just from the very beginning, I think there were quite a few sort of symbolic pieces that felt intentional, but oddly placed for an American audience. So When you saw the very beginning of this story, did it, first of all, did it surprise you that they started with the supernatural so quickly?
Yeah, because it was right out the jump. It was right out the jump. They went straight to it, and I was a little surprised. And I mean, it was very well done the way they did it, and I love that opening scene on the dock. And it was, it was very creepy. It had that very creepy vibe to it, and so I wasn't. Maybe that was like kind of what they learned from the last season is to hit them with it right off the bat. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that's what was at play here, but I liked it though. I liked how it got off right into it, and
Well,
it was ever present throughout the first episode.
what I think was interesting, without trying to draw too many comparisons between, the season that was and this, I feel a little bit like we're talking about American Horror Story, where it's like it's hard to draw a whole bunch of narratives between them because they're clearly telling different stories. But the mood of this of what we just saw is quite a bit different than the mood that we had in the setup for the terror in the original series. It did feel a bit more like we were engaged very quickly with quite a cast of characters. And that also felt a little bit, it's just a little bit different in terms of the actual storytelling. But it also felt like all of a sudden we were a part of an entire family. We had a lot of information about what these people are going through right at this very moment. We had a lot of information about what is happening in the world. We had a lot of information about quite a few things. And so I'm wondering, just from a guessing standpoint, do you think that what is about to happen is going to feel more like an unfolding story that draws a little bit more on the history and less on the supernatural, or does it feel like it's actually going to draw a lot on the supernatural and then the history is just a backdrop? Because I have a theory about this, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say first.
I think they're going to try to serve two masters almost equally. I think if when you listen to some of the people behind it, it's very important for them to let people know about the history, right? Which is it's a very important history. And then also um, you have the supernatural element, which is hallmarks of the terror. So you're gonna get. I think you're gonna just get both.
Well, here's my theory. My theory is that like you said, they learned a little bit of a lesson the last time, which is that, and I'm not saying that this was a lesson that they needed to learn. I'm saying that this was just something that they came across and said, you know what, maybe there's a better way to do this. And part of it has to do with getting us immersed in the world that we're supposed to belong to a little bit faster than we did the last time. The last inside of this story, I guess I won't use too many comparisons here, but in this particular story, the way that they set things up, it felt very much like, look, there's a lot of things in Japanese culture that are very different from our own culture, but there are also a lot of similarities in the sense that you can draw some pretty direct comparisons to the way that people respond. And I can think of a number of instances right off the top with people behaving like they are ashamed of. They have family issues. They have a bully issue. They have all kinds of things that are sort of direct human experiences. And then you throw in this piece of supernatural mythos, and that's what's clearly driving kind of a central message. But I think and I don't know because we're only on episode one, but my guess is that that supernatural piece, as big as it was in this episode, is going to pale in comparison to what we are about to see human do to human. I get that. I get a huge message from what is happening, that it is the relationships between the people that it's really all going to boil down to. And I can't say that that's not a great idea, because I think that that's what the writers were really successful at the last time around too. What do you think?
No, I agree. I agree, and we've already got a taste of it. You know, so they're already setting that up. That very thing.
So what did you think? So okay, so a couple questions, right? So what did you think about the main characters? First of all, I have to just shout this out because I absolutely love this. I loved seeing George Takai in almost any role that I can see him in. I just want to see him. I have such a personal affection for this man. There's so many amazing things that I could say, but on screen there is just a presence there that was at the same time comforting and also very dynamic. So what did you think of the main characters? Well, tell me what you thought of. Pick one character and tell me what you thought of him.
Okay. And let me just so I won't sound stupid. Let me pull up a cast list so that I can say it with some intelligence. All right. And as I say that, um, okay. So let's start off with the main character, Chester.
Chester, right?
Yeah. First of all, that actor is really good. Uh, from the beginning, they really establish him as, the conflict between him. It's something that's been done a lot, the old country versus new country type thing. But still, though, uh, I felt like that he's gonna have to carry this season, and he's fascinating already. Right off the gate. So I can appreciate this actor, and I think they found a good one. So and it's still early, so there's still a lot to find out about him, but I like him so
I,
far.
I like the fact that Chester seems to not just walk between worlds, between the old world and the new world, but that he also is that they're not afraid to portray him as being very unsure of himself. He doesn't know what to do. He when he goes to basically when he approaches the situation between him and the girlfriend, it is clearly this is not a decision that he has come to lightly, but you can feel that there are all kinds of conflicts around it. And there's very little dialogue said about it at all. That to me seems like the actor is doing a good job of portraying how complicated that really is. And is that really what sets everything off? Do we really know that that's what sets everything off, or is there something a little bit deeper under that? I suspect that that might be what's happening. But I love how he somehow personalizes what's happening as maybe this is partly my fault. When he takes the car back and tries to go and say, hey, we could go anywhere, the reality of what's happening is so pronounced, and you can see it etched on his face, which I think was also really good. I liked that a lot.
No, I did as well. Yeah.
What did you think of Henry, his dad?
Um, well, Henry, oddly enough, he was the person I was going to next. I think he's a very fine actor so far. He really has the gravitas that you would need to play this character, and pretty much you get right into it right away. So with him, so I really have enjoyed him in this first episode. So
What do you think that relationship between father and son sort of gives the narrative, other than, like you said, to point out that there's a difference between sort of the old and the new? it also feels like there is something perhaps even more dynamic at work. There obviously there's a generational shift between the two of them. His dad sees things one way, he sees things another way. But I, I think one of the things that really struck me about their relationship was they're the two of them. There's something that is the sameness about them as different as they are. And I kind of liked that. As different as he wants to be, he wants to leave. Terminal Island is, it's a small place, and he wants to go experience the wide world. And his dad is saying, "Yeah, we all know what's going to happen." I liked that because that interaction between the two of them felt like we fell into it really quickly. And again, I have to give these guys credit. There's so I've seen a lot of beginning pilots. Well, this is, I guess, it's not really a pilot, but beginning episodes where they sort of expect a lot from us in terms of introducing a cast of characters. And they don't always do a really great job of sort of sucking you into why it's important to even care about these people. And I felt like I cared about everybody, which it was really strange. I even felt bad when wow, I'm a really bad host here. But when what's his name died, when he was blown by the wind off of the boat, I even actually felt bad for him. Not because I felt bad, he was going to set the boat on fire. I mean, like I had a genuine feeling of, wow, this guy was really, really, really messed up. That how horrible must it be to have so much hate all the time? That's got to be awful. But like it's unusual for me to actually feel that way.
I had absolutely no sympathy at all. I loved it when he died.
We all really thought that that they were gonna burn the boat. I mean, that just seemed like, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so no sympathy for his play.
So what do you think is up with the wind?
I think it's I believe it's one of those things that they were talking about, like where it's a it's a um the spirit. I mean, to me, that's the only thing I can think of.
One of the other reasons that, of course, this is so different is although I can go back and I can look at some Japanese mythology and I can make some educated guesses, which I think I will wait to do until the next episode. One of the things that I can't do is look into like what the character motivations might be as they would be if I had read a book, which is what happened with last season, where it was based on Dan Simmons's book. And there was a lot of character inner monologue to sort of get to know the characters pretty well. This time, obviously, we don't have that. And I think that's one of the reasons I keep going back to the fact that the characters are genuinely well written enough that I didn't feel like I needed all that inner monologue in order to succeed at feeling something for them. But I am very curious about the supernatural angle of it. It certainly it it seemed to me that if we're going to draw any kind of parallel between what's happening here and some kind of Western idea, that it's like sort of demon possession esque. But at the same time, it also feels so incredibly different because nothing that I can think of manifests itself that way. When he was looking up into the sun, that was that was a scary moment. I'm a little confused about why I have read in several articles that the show was just a little bit too short on being anything other than slow. That they pitched it really hard, but that it didn't have a lot of moments to sort of make it memorable. And I really disagree with that. Although I do think that it was narratively slow and probably purposefully so. I certainly didn't get the feeling that there wasn't enough action inside of the episode to keep things both interesting and sort of going. Did you get that feeling at all?
Um, I mean, it was a slow burn. It
For
was a
sure.
slow burn, and it was, and I was actually. The thing is this: when you this is going to be a hard sell anyway, right?
Didn't we say that about last season though?
Yes, but
We
see,
did.
but then you have the cultural thing as well. You know, you get what I'm saying?
I do. And I think that you are absolutely right. It is going to be a little bit more it'll be a little bit more difficult, I think, to get things ramped up to the audience's liking. But I think that there is a case to be made for the an initial sort of immersion into who the characters are, and again, why should we care about them, because once things begin, and we saw at the end of this episode, we know what that signals, and it signals the attack on Pearl Harbor. It signals all of the cascade of historical events that happen around that, and why Japanese Americans, why they thought that they needed to be in internment camps. Now, what I think this show has working in its favor, and I can't say that it's coincidental, but what's interesting is where we are in history right now, and the kinds of cultural topics that we're talking about right now have direct correlations in this story. So I think that there some of that it'll turn some people off, and it will make some people very interested. From the purely historical standpoint, though, this it is going to be a bit tough because World War II is it's always been a bit tough to get people. It's just so big. There's just so much going on. But by keeping the story centered around the family and what is happening to this group, the group from Terminal Island as they go into the internment camp, I think that there is something that that maybe will transcend what was what I think was even a problem with last season. And I I say it's a problem in the sense that from a mainstream media standpoint, it might be a little bit difficult. But I don't remember people even being interested in the terror until it was almost done. And then all of a sudden, people were sort of beating a drum loudly about how well it had transpired, how good the season had sort of come off, and why the writing was so good and why the episodes were so amazing. But it really took a while for it to catch on. And I don't really see this as being any different. I don't know. Am I missing something?
Hey, I was one of those people.
Yeah, I remember.
I was, but I had a lot going on personally, so it was that, and it was a slow burn, and it wasn't something that you just jump right into and just it captured. At least for me, it didn't. Maybe if I did my normal, what I would do, you know, if I watched it normally, then maybe I would have just got into it. Because when I rewatched it again, I was like, wow, this was pretty awesome. So
There's a visual tone here which is definitely different from the last season. The visual tone here is almost a poetry in motion, juxtaposed by very um, unsettling kinds of images. And I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral where there's an actual casket. One of the things, even when it's an open casket, one of the things that is that somehow your behavior becomes so incredibly respectful of the dead. I mean, there's just this aura of something important happening here as you honor someone who's not here, the honor, the memory of someone who's not here. But the shell of who's not here is, I think, also important. That is part of what we humans experience. And so that very opening piece where the casket falls over and she rolls out of it, to me, had that same creepy feeling as some of the stuff that we saw originally in the terror that didn't, the original terror, that didn't seem to make total sense, but still made us feel super uncomfortable. In this iteration, it does feel like they are going for something a little bit more, again, overt on the supernatural side, but I also find myself wanting to temper that with, even though it's overt on the supernatural side, I'm still of the opinion that the core of what we're about to see is the story of humans being the bigger monsters than the monsters. Does that make sense?
It makes all the sense in the world. I mean, yeah, and humans are the monsters generally.
Yeah, that's why we keep making stories about them, I swear.
Right.
So one sort of other, aspect to all of this is the one of the other things that I found incredibly creepy on my second watch through is the the sound design of of this entire episode. It feels like it was purposefully crafted to be understated, but it had maximum effect. Um, the scene that I'm thinking of in particular, where he gets his tie caught in the machine,
Mhm.
there was a tenseness to the sound there, which was so simple but so important. Like, I don't know. Oh, that I actually that brings up a really good point. I although I want to make sure that I finish this, I do want to talk about why some of these things are so important. Um, the overall sound quality was just amazing in the sense that what they score in the background, it has that same sort of, there's a haunting feel to it, but it never feels off key. It still always feels like it is, like the world is still okay at this point, right? Does that make sense? I mean, like in some horror movies or horror experiences, music goes off tone when the world either shifts or when the supernatural is introduced. And here, things still felt fairly on key. Not perfect, but fairly on key. Did you notice that at all?
Mm-mm, no, I didn't.
So if you watch it again, watch that scene that's in the factory. It's actually kind of interesting. So let's go to that scene in the factory real quick.
Okay.
Um, One of the things that sort of surprises me, and I know it's intentional, but it still surprises me, is, you know we often, especially culturally, uh, give each other tropey kinds of assignments in terms of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, right?
Mhm.
And in the last episode, it was really obvious who the good guy was and who the bad guy was, right? I suspect that will also change. But I have to ask, did you at all find that character to be too over the top, almost cartoonishly over the top?
No, I mean, I can see in a way that how you could feel that way, but he fit how these guys were back
Yeah,
then.
see, you're right. And I that's exactly the reason that I bring that up is because that was a criticism that was mentioned as we were watching this, and I personally didn't find that to be true. I found that that is exactly the way people behave when they have power over other people. It's not just that they behave sometimes amorally. It's that they behave in sort of the worst possible ways that they can by extracting sort of as much as they can from people that they know are weaker than they are. And that felt really poignant. It just felt really important at that moment.
No, no, yeah. No, I totally believe this is exactly how he probably would have been worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, he fit it. Maybe how the actor looked and all of that. Maybe that, he did kind of a goofy look and feel to him. But no, he I could see that guy being who he was.
Yeah, it to me it didn't feel like he was taking any additional liberties with the way that he, like, well, I got fired, therefore it's got to be your fault, so I'll take something from you because I feel like something was taken from me. I mean, that just seems like that's exactly what happens when we put each other into, or when we put each other, when we are in positions of having that kind of power. It's a very interesting dynamic, and historically that feels also very much, I think, why this is such a different kind of story. We're not dealing with the kind of regimented understanding that we had in the past season, where relationships will make sense based on rank, based on a kind of order that existed. We don't have that here. What we have is a societal order, and that societal order is about to get thrown completely upside down again, because none of these people have been in this situation before, and all of these people believe that they are Americans, right? I mean, none of these people actually are thinking, oh hey, I'm a Japanese spy or something, which makes the which makes the importance of understanding sort of what's happening even, I think, a little bit more. There's something bigger to that than just what the supernatural piece is in this. It's understanding all of those dynamics together, because my guess is that the super why would that supernatural force throw him off of the boat? I mean, it's not like the supernatural force is targeting the good guy,
Right.
or so I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's almost impossible for me to see how this is going to, because we don't have any of the entity isn't sort of picking and choosing according to what I would expect, right?
Right. No, yeah.
Did
No, no, you're making great sense. Yeah. I kind of like that. I wish that was like a real thing. You
Where it kind of keeps you guessing?
No, I mean this entity that goes around and does that. I wish.
So okay, so let's jump toward the end of the episode and what we see at the end of the episode with the skin stitching scene.
Hmm.
Tell me, first of all, what did you think of that? But and secondly, what do you think that that actually means? And and just in terms of what Chester heard from her, how did that change what you thought about her?
Um. Well, I saw the featurette and the showrunner said something about there's something alien about her. I don't think he was saying that she's an alien. Because I don't think he would. If that was the case, I don't think he would have spoiled it like that.
Oh, that's a good point.
But I think that I think she must be otherworldly in some form or fashion, but who knows how exactly. She definitely. I mean, it was a very creepy scene for sure.
So okay, so I know we only have one episode here behind us, but what do you, obviously it wasn't the healer that brought everything into play, even though she committed suicide on the dock after delivering the vials to Chester. Uh, what do you think is at play here?
I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. I'm not quite sure. I need more information. Uh, I've tried to think about it, and then part of me doesn't want to think about it because I just want to be along for the ride. So, but I know that's not fun for a podcast. So, I guess people at home want us to come up with what we think.
Actually, you know what? Actually, I disagree. I actually disagree with that. I think it 100% is within sort of our let's talk about this purview to be just along for the ride, because because again, this is going to go back to the way that things are culturally. I'm not Japanese American. You're not Japanese American. We don't have that kind of cultural identity that we're able to talk about a lot of the things that might be happening, and how that might sort of play in. But what we can say is how this stuff makes us feel, what we experience watching it, and why some of the supernatural and the real life horror pieces as they come together, why they're so important to sort of view through the lens of history. I feel like that is 100% the I feel like that's basically what we were supposed to do even last season too, and it's really what we ended up doing, because even though I had read the book and I know Yardley um had some experience with it, it was not the terror in terms of what unfolded for us episode by episode was definitely not the whole or even the biggest piece of Dan Simmons's book. It was definitely just a representation of some of the events that happened in it. So th- we were all still along for that ride too, and none of us, I wouldn't have known any of that mythology that Dan Simmons was talking about. That's definitely not, I don't know any of that stuff. So does that sort of make sense? Like, I don't want you to think that you have to come up with some kind of theory about what's happening. I'm just really wondering what you thought altogether about what had transpired so far.
Um, Basically, there's something unworldly going on. It's very similar to last season. Is we have a historical situation, and we have we're retelling history, and to do that, we are adding a supernatural element to it to kind of buffer out, and and to also, I think that the supernatural element is meant to serve as maybe a proxy for certain things, and there's some deeper meaning behind the supernatural element, and it's a cool way to, because very similar to last season, it's a way to convey certain thoughts, um, about what they feel about the historical situation.
Right, where last season was really kind of a very wide metaphor for imperialism and that kind of uh, domination of the world. You're right. I actually feel like the supernatural piece of this is a conduit somehow tying together old world and new world, and that's why we have generations at the center point, and not just a group of characters that maybe are not related. I mean, I feel like there's a very specific purpose behind having the old and the young together, that that is a central thematic element. I also can't overlook the fact that Chester, when he takes pictures, seems to capture something that is different than what maybe even than what other people are experiencing. I mean, he something is definitely attached somehow to his experience, which I think is also important.
Oh, very much important. And as this goes along, we're gonna find out more and more, and it's gonna be an interesting ride.
I would like to say that even though, and I know George Takei was in it, so that's one sort of big name. although we don't have a huge number of well-known names, I was really impressed with the casting here in the sense that all of these people are definitely Asian, and they didn't try to sort of whitewash things. They didn't try to make it feel to us like, well, this person can pass for this or whatever. It felt very, that to me felt really good because I know that this is number one, it's just really tough to tell tales that are sort of outside of your culture, but also this particular moment in history is one of the, I think it's overlooked in the sense of the severity of that moment and what it turned us as a nation sort of into, and how it affected us even afterwards, not just the community inside of the internment camp, which I feel like is one of those stories that we just don't get to hear those stories. Even when we see pictures of them, we don't get to hear the stories of what may have happened there. But also we just don't really talk about it as being a thing that happened very often. Here in Hawaii, we tend to hear a little bit more just because there is sort of a bigger Japanese community here. But I didn't even know about Japanese internment camps until I moved here. And, I knew all kinds of stuff about Western European culture growing up on the East Coast. So I feel like this is actually a really awesome also breakout moment. Well, maybe not breakout moment, but an awareness moment for a lot of people who don't even know this history. You know, that to me actually feels kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I was always very aware of this, and I'm glad that people are talking about it. And it definitely is one of those things that shouldn't be swept under the rug. You know.
So, just one last thing. I would love to hear from you what you sort of expect uh, in the coming episodes. Whether they're based on anything that you've seen or not. What are some things that you would like to see in coming episodes?
I want to see a deep dive between Chester, uh, to get to know his character more, which I'm very certain that's going to happen. And I would like I would like to see. Um, I hope this ends more hopeful than their first season,
Mm.
because the first season was a complete tragedy. And I'm gonna hope that this season doesn't end. It ends more hopeful, and so one thing I do expect, though, I do expect to have a lot of like every week there's gonna be more and more questions, and hopefully by the time this ends, that we'll be satisfied with the answers.
Well, and I have a feeling that obviously Yuko is going to play the tea reader is going to play a huge part in all of this. But I have a feeling that what will happen is we will start seeing correlations and interesting plot points as in the prior episode as we see the next episode. So because if anything, last season taught me that the writers like to do reveals that are not just slow, because that's one way of looking at it, but they like to do very thoughtful reveals. Like the horror is oftentimes it's not sort of just in your face. It's the horror is a very, it's a personal horror. It's a very intimate sense of what scares you. And my guess is, again, as we go forward, each episode that we watch will give us a clue about the previous episode in terms of what we saw. There was so much symbolism, so many metaphors that happened in this episode. It's a really big thing to tackle. But I really just wanted to start our season by getting sort of an overview, a feel for what things were. And then as the episodes go by, we can start talking a little bit more about how those things play out. I have a lot of I think, interesting ideas about where some of these things both may end up and what they really kind of are in terms of what they mean to the people, what they mean to the characters. Why was tea reading important? What really happened in that scene? Those kinds of things, I think we should fill in the blanks kind of as we go, because in this first episode, it really did feel like it was kind of a world immersion. And that needs to sort of settle and gel. And then we know that in the next episode, some pretty big things are going to happen. And again, my guess is that those things will help us to sort of tie things together in loose knots, so that we can sort of see what might be to come.
I'm calling it. The spirit is Toowoomba's cousin.
Oh, that would be really well. It could be. I mean, it could really be shape shifting something.
Yeah.
Um, and who do we know? Toonbox demon. Wow, that could open up a whole new thing. Next episode, let's actually look at, let's remember back to how Tinbok got to be Tinbok and see if we can make any kind of correlation. That would be super interesting.
Yeah. See, uh, and it'll be like a full circle.
Good job. Yeah, that could actually be really interesting.
Mhm.
All right then. Okay, well, how can people grab you on social media, Kinte?
They can get me at Kente F on Twitter, Kente Ferguson on Instagram, and of course the website is indyradio.org. That's INDY radio.org.
And you can get me on Twitter at following bliss1. You can visit my websites at criticallaughs.com and moviesmakethemeal.com, and join us for Cinema du Fromage next week. And yeah, it should be fun. We're going to be doing one of the most awesome Halloween movies. You'll have to tune in and have a listen. So until next time.
Peace.